Okay, so now that we've began to master what the object, the subject, and the verb are in a sentence, we can start playing around with them and having a look at the difference between an active and a passive voice. We've done this already, so this is just a revision lesson. But depending on where in the sentence you use your subject and where in a sentence you use your object, depends, will change the sentence to be either in the active or passive voice. Sometimes you hear them called active sentences, sometimes you hear it being called the active voice, sometimes you hear it being called an active verb, sometimes you hear it being called a passive verb, but it's all the same thing. Okay, so could you write that title, Walt, and date down for me, underline please. Don't worry about this, I'll get to that in a moment. But just a reminder, before we carry on, it's very important that you now know the difference between a subject, a verb, and an object. We've been doing this for a couple of days now, so it's just a little bit of revision. Subject, verb, and object. So let's start with the verb. The verb is our doing word, the action. We can't have a sentence without it. A verb is something happening. The subject is the thing, that could be a noun, it could be a noun phrase, or it could be a pronoun, is the thing doing that verb. Sometimes we also have an object, and the object in a sentence is the thing having the verb done to it. So this is a really simple sentence. Milo, which I assume is a dog, Milo grabbed the postman's leg. So what's the verb there? Well, the verb is the action, and the action there is grabbed. And we say that the subject is the thing doing the verb. So who's doing the grabbing? Well, it's Milo. So Milo is the subject. And what is being grabbed, what's the verb acting upon? It's the postman's leg. So as we can see here, an object can be a noun or a noun phrase, in this case, postman's leg. It could also have been a pronoun, so it could have been Milo grabbed it, and the object would have been a pronoun. Similarly, the subject could have been a pronoun, it grabbed the postman's leg, and so on. Okay, so now we know what the subject, the verb, and an object is. Have a practice. On the sheet that you have, you may need to pause the video and open it. You have two paragraphs. They say more or less the same thing. They've just worded slightly differently. We'll get on to why that is in a moment. So you should have this on two sheets. If you're able to print this out, that's fine, but make sure you're able to cut it out to size and glue it in. If you don't, you just need to copy it down, like I've done here. And what you need to do is mark subject, verb, and object for each text. Just write a S, V, and O above it. I suggest, which will make this easier, starting with a verb. I'll go through the first one with you. So, Gary was having to have, it's a verb. I don't know what it is I pressed to make this camera turn off. Anyway, let's continue. Gary was having, verb, a bad day. He accidentally threw, that's definitely a verb, to throw, comes from the verb to throw, his favourite magazine in the bin. Oh, Gary, what are you doing? He then banged his leg on a chair, to bang, past tense of bang, the word for hit, obviously, and found his mum had shrunk his best sweater. So found comes from to find, and shrunk comes from to shrink. So there we go, there's all our verbs. I've done it in red, you can do it in whatever colour you like. So now we know what the verbs are, we need to find out what the subjects are. So remember, the subjects are the things doing the verbs. So who's doing the having? Oh, Gary. Gary's doing the having. I've switched to green. So Gary's my subject there. Where's another verb? Through. Oh, there we go. Who's doing the throwing? He's doing the throwing. So that's another subject. Our next verb. Banged. Who's doing the banging? Well, it's his leg, isn't it? but his leg here is a possession, so it's actually Gary again, so he is the subject there. And found his mum had shrunk. Who's doing the shrinking? Well, it's his mum. His mum is doing the shrinking, so I'm going to write it here, but I mean the whole thing, his mum. Okay, so then finally, we need to look at the objects. And the objects are the things that the verb is doing to, is the object of the verb. So Gary was having a bad day. So bad day here is the object. He accidentally threw, what is he throwing? His favourite magazine. So favourite magazine is the object in the bin. He then banged, but what did he bang? His leg. That's what he banged. So that's the object on a chair, and found his mum had shrunk his best sweater. So what's being shrunk? The best sweater. So what's doing the having? Gary. What is it having? A bad day. What's doing the throwing? He. And what is being thrown? Favourite magazine. What's doing the banging? He. And what is being banged? His leg. What's doing the shrinking? His mum. And what is being shrunk? His sweater. Okay, so do that again, this time version 2, and tell me what you noticed, or have a think about what you noticed. It was a bad day for Gary. His favourite magazine was accidentally thrown in the bin. His leg was banged on a chair, and his best sweater had shrunk in the wash. What's the obvious difference there when you compare the two sentences? Once you've written down the subject, verb, object, what do you notice? What's changed? Okay, well, there are the answers. Feel free to pause it and check them. They haven't put found as a verb there. It is a verb, but it's not an important one for this exercise. Okay, so now we get on to thinking about active and passive sentences. I've written this in the description, so you can read it in the description. An active sentence is when the subject comes before the verb. A passive sentence is when an object becomes in front of the verb. Now, you can more or less choose which way round you do this. However, we'll discuss in a little bit why you might want to make a sentence passive and why you might want to make a sentence active. But for now, let's try and think about this. If the subject comes before the verb, it's active. If the object is before the verb, then it's passive. These are all active because here we go. Writes is our verb, and the object, Emma, she's doing the writing, comes before. The lion enthusiastically gobbles his meat. The verb there is gobbles. Who's doing the gobbling? The lion, the object again. The subject again. The subject has come before. The subject has come before the verb. And in the last one, the verb is sing. Who's doing the singing? Mermaids. And look, mermaids comes before sings. Now, it's a really important skill to be able to change these around. You're going to have to change some of the words completely, and some of the words you're going to have to just change the tense slightly. I'll give you the first one, then see how you get on with the second two. Emma writes up to 10 letters a day. Now, if I want to make this passive, I need to put the object, which is here, 10 letters, before the word writes. And then I still need to stick Emma in somewhere, okay? So have a think to yourself, how would I change that so that 10 letters comes before the verb to write? I'm going to need to change the verb here, aren't I? because Emma writes makes sense, but 10 letters writes doesn't make sense. So well done if you got this. But 10 letters a day are written by Emma. Okay, so I've had to change it a bit, but 10 letters a day are written by Emma. I've changed the verb there, obviously. It's the same verb, but in a different form. Okay, so how about this second one? The lion enthusiastically, I'm not going to give you the answer to this one, I want to let you have a go. The lion enthusiastically gobbles his meat. Now we've got to put the word meat, because meat is the object here. How can I put meat in front of gobbles? Sorry, how can I put meat in front of gobbles? I have to change some things and then put the line at the end. So first of all, I would start, I'm not going to give you the whole answer, but I would say the meat, I'll change to the meat, is, that's how you start it. The meat is, and then how do you get the rest of that information in there to make it passive? And again, with the last one, I'm not going to give you any help with the last one, but it says mermaids often sing the most melodious and beautiful tunes. Mermaids often sing the most melodious and beautiful tunes. How would you change that one? I'll just tell you what the subject, the object, and the verb are. Object's at the beginning. Verb is to sing. And melodious and beautiful tune is the object. So how do you put melodious and beautiful tunes before the verb to sing and that sentence to mean the same thing? Okay, just a quick word on the worksheet if you're working through it. You may have thought, well, what happened to task 2? You can ignore task 2. You're going to do task 1, task 3 and task 4. So pause the video, work your way through those two. So just a reminder, Emma writes up to 10 letters a day. Can be changed to up to 10 letters a day are written by Emma. It says that by is a really, really useful word when you're doing this. The lion enthusiastically gobbles his meat. So that's going to be changed to the meat is. I'm going to have to change gobbles to a slightly different form of that verb. And then the last one, mermaids often sing the most melodious and beautiful tunes. How do you change that so melodious and beautiful tunes come before the verb to sing? Okay. Lastly, here are some nice examples of sentences which are written first actively and then passively. As a general rule of thumb, if you want the object to be the most important part of the sentence, or the object is the thing you want to focus on, you make a passive sentence. You can make it passive. If you want the subject to be the most important, you make it active. If you don't know, you're not sure, or you think it's about even, you think, well, they're both important, I would say use active. So only use passive, only put the object first if the object is actually the thing you want to focus on. Okay, so here are some scenarios. It's up to you to write which one you think is better. They're both right, but which one you think is better and why. There isn't really a correct answer here, as long as you come up with a good reason. So a mum is telling off her daughter. She is angry and wants the daughter to know it. Elizabeth, you have smashed my best vase. Elizabeth, the vase has been smashed. Focus in there on she is angry and wants her daughter to know it. Which sentence makes it sound like the mum wants Elizabeth to know that she's angry? So the first one is active. You have smashed my best vase. In the second one, it's passive because they put the object before smashed. The vase has been smashed. The vase has been smashed. Even though Elizabeth's at the beginning of the sentence, just before the verb smashed, we've written the verb, the object. How about this one? Tony is telling his neighbour that her cat has been killed. That's a rather sad one. But what's better here? I'm sorry, a car ran over Tiddles. Or I'm so sorry, Tiddles was run over by the car. The first one, the car ran over Tiddles. The car is the subject, is doing the running over, and Tiddles is the poor thing being run over. So that one is active. Second, Tiddles, the object, we put that before. Tiddles was run over by a car. So remember we said before, in the first one, the active one, it makes it sound like the car is the focus here. It was a car that ran over Tiddles. In the second one, the most important fact is that it was Tiddles that got run over. It's less important that it's a car. It's more important that it was Tiddles. So in the first one, we've got a car run over Tiddles. In the second one, it's more Tiddles was run over by a car. And finally, last one. Which do you think is better here, active or passive? A child is explaining where the cookies went. As I left the kitchen, I ate the cookies. As I left the kitchen, I ate the cookies. I ate the cookies. So the verb there, eat, to eat. Who's doing the eating? I am. What's being eaten? The cookies. So that one is active because the subject comes before the verb. In the second one, as I left the kitchen, the cookies were eaten. In fact, as you probably found out from the first one, you don't necessarily have to have both the subject and an object. It's just important which one comes first. And the cookies were eaten. There's no subject there, but there is an object, and it comes just before the verb, so it is still passive. So the cookies were eaten. That's an interesting one, isn't it? So in the first one, it's like the emphasis is on the child. I ate the cookies. It was me. In the second one, it seems like the most important part of that sentence is the cookies. The cookies were eaten. Really interesting. So like I said, as long as you come up with a good reason, I'll leave that one up to you. I think there's 3 obvious answers, but if you disagree, then that's fine. I think that's it. Yeah. So work your way through this. If you can print out the sheet, that's great. You can work straight on the sheet. If not, just write out each one. If you do print out the sheet, make sure you're gluing it in. Task 4 goes down here. Please, can you take a neat photograph of your book and send it to me before 12 o'clock if you can. If you can't, just make sure you let me know beforehand. And now, once you've finished, you can do the quiz. It's not a very long quiz, so not to worry. If you finish dead quickly, please get on with some reading, and I'll see you at 12 o'clock. Oh, actually, no, sorry, pardon me. It's Thursday, isn't it? I won't see you at 12 o'clock. I won't see you at 12 o'clock, so we'll go through the answers tomorrow. Okay, thank you.